The consular matricula, yeah.
I mean, I had the leader of the Republican Senate on a few years ago, and he in one day himself went and got 4 fake IDs from a Mexican consulate.
Well, it is a challenge, but the problem for us as police officers at the local level is policing a community that we know is here, and policing a community that we don't control the borders. We have to control what's in our city, and I think some of the frustration is that the reality is the way that you deal with immigration is you dry up jobs, you dry up some of those opportunities. People wouldn't come here illegally. And to me, if you're going to get serious, that's where you start, is with employers.
Oh, I agree. I am for plus, just as a citizen, I want people to be able to have entry-level jobs, no matter what color they are. We've got hundreds of millions of people that want to come here. And the states are already bankrupt, the hospitals. One weekend, I cut my finger off on accident to helping some people with their boat out in Lake Travis. It was flopping around. And so the ambulance took me down to the city hospital, and there was just rows of illegal aliens in there who had no insurance. And
well, that might be an assumption. Just because they look Hispanic, how do you know they're illegal?
No, I was listening. I was listening.
Okay.
I was sitting there with my hand wrapped up with it hanging by a piece of skin, and my dad, who's a physician's there, saying he needs to get this attached fast. I've called him. He drove down.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, but it wasn't just that. It was poor people. It was it was a Sunday full of poor people who were so poor they don't have insurance, and then about half of them were, because I was watching, they'd go up, and they'd say, "Do you have insurance? Do you have ID?" "No." "Well, who are you?" And then because they knew that they weren't going to have insurance, but they needed to provide care, which I'm saying is good, they went right through. My point is the country is breaking down, and we need to not give third world populations special status, or it's going to destroy this country. I'm all for immigrants coming to this nation. Just like, you were born in Cuba fleeing communism.
Yeah, well, we applied to come here. We applied for...
No, I know, but I'm all for that. That's what I'm saying, Chief.
But here's the issue, though. There are some unintended consequences. Remember, now, the job of immigration enforcement lies primarily with the federal government. It's their job. We have people here that keep arguing we shouldn't arrest people that are committing burglaries, or we can't keep the burglars, the rapists, all these other folks in jail because there's no jail space. If ICE isn't going to pick them up, then it kind of defeats the purpose of taking them there, if that's the only reason you're taking them there for. But here's our challenge. The unintended consequences, if you have 10 million people here illegally, that if they get deported, they're going to probably be back within a few days because they know the routes, they know how to come back. We lose potentially 10 million witnesses to crime. 10 million... one of our kids gets kidnapped at the bus stop, and the little old lady that's the child care attendant for somebody that they hired.
No, I understand people.
Now they're afraid to call the local cop, and they might be. The Amber Alert system actually works. I think you know that. I mean, the West Coast has had a 100% recovery rate. It is a great system.
Yeah, but now they're going to use it, for flashing. Call terrorist tip line. Don't water your yard on Tuesdays.
No, you can't get crazy with that because it waters it down. People lose interest and it loses its effectiveness. But that's one of the unintended consequences. That if people start becoming afraid of calling the cops aren't going to take enforcement action against somebody. That the next time they victimize somebody, it may be you or me or someone else. So it has to be a comprehensive approach that starts with securing our border, making sure that people can only get jobs if they're here legally, if they're serious about it. But it really is a federal issue that they've got to be the ones that take the lead on it.
Well, Chief Acevedo, I agree with a lot of what you're saying about how it should be federal, about how it should be enforced against employers. It's very hypocritical to arrest these immigrants and treat them bad, and believe me, I know how bad Mexico is. In Mexico City, 30 million people, half of them living in cardboard boxes. It's hell on earth. Yeah. The problem is this country's like a lifeboat. That will pull the boat completely down if we just say unlimited and the crime and then give them a double standard. And I understand this rationale, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
And to just say we have to have this interface with the community, and so we have to go with kid gloves. I'm saying there's not kid gloves with me, because I'm seen as the big fat milk cow. I'm seen as the dumb American driving around in their SUV.
Trust me, you're not seen as a dumb guy. You're seen as a very bright, articulate, well-informed individual. But
I'm just talking about the citizens. But citizens are seen as the milk cow to be sucked off of.
Well, but here's the issue. Here's plain devil's advocate to your position. If I get involved and just start asking people for your papers solely for the reason to see if they're here legally or not, and 3 days, and they get deported, and 3 days later they're back, and now that same person in the future sees a crime or is a victim of crime, and they will no longer want to cooperate with me, how has public safety being enhanced.
Well, I want to be clear. I think there should be an amnesty in that if someone comes in to report a crime, it's policy and it's advertised that if you come in for seeing a stabbing or a shooting or
that's
a robbery.
That's a U visa. That's actually it in law now.
Yeah, but the Austin cops have told me, and I've sat around at bars and restaurants with them. I got friends that are cops. I've worked out with cops, and they go, yeah, we're basically told and encouraged. We get in trouble. We get, start getting demerits for other issues if we drag in a bunch of illegal aliens.
Now,
it's wrong. It's wrong.
You need to know something about cop culture. Cops sometimes talk out of school a lot, where they'll start telling you, and they're talking stories, they're talking shop, and you got to take sometimes.
Oh, now we can't believe the cops.
Well, when you're out there at the bar, you're mentioning bars, you're mentioning drinks. Next thing you know, they got the biggest fish that they caught when they went fishing. You got to take it with a little grain of salt when they're telling stories, because there's a lot of urban legends and myths and everything else that goes into it.
Police Chief Art Acevedo, he is a slick one, ladies and gentlemen.
What are you talking about? But the reality is, we will not, when my cop makes a lawful arrest, I don't care if the person is legal or illegal, our position is we expect them to take the proper enforcement action, irregardless of the person's status. And that's the best I can do.
Okay, so police listening right now, and they listen to this show. We're on 90.1, 1330, 590. We're going to re-air this. They're hearing you. They pull somebody over, and there's beer cans in the back. There's no ID, no insurance. What happens?
You take the proper enforcement action, regardless of what they're.
But what is that? You're saying you leave it up to them.
If it's an offense where it's a ticket, you write a ticket. If it's an offense where they're supposed to go to jail, you take them to jail.
But how do you write a ticket if you don't know who they are? They arrested my guy because he didn't have an ID.
If you don't know who they are and you can't identify them, there's tactics. I'm not going to give you the tactics on how to. People can't get their story straight half the time. So there's ways to get information, identify people. But here's what
stay there, sir. Final segment coming up with the Austin Police Chief. This has been great. Stay with us.
I'm enjoying it.
Police Chief Art Acevedo is our guest for this segment and one more. And we're really honored to have him with us. During the break, we were having a really animated discussion. I said, hey, what I don't want is what you grew up in Cuba, what you fought to leave. And we're glad to have people that love freedom in this country. And our arms are totally open to that. And we need people that have experienced tyranny so they can fight against it here. But having children spy on their parents, it always starts out, for drugs, or if you're being abused, or if you're this or you're that. I mean, I've gone and I've seen the abuses. I've seen CPS snatch people's babies and then lie on the forums because I was there and take them for adoption. I know that the system's gotten predatory. And I'm sure you're a nice guy and a good guy and a smart guy, and you see the good in what's happening. I see a lot of the bad, and I know that we're becoming more like a Cuba, more like a Soviet Union, more like a East Germany with the spying, the control, all of this, and it isn't for our security. I know I read the RAND Corporation documents. I know how they're federalizing departments. I know the larger plan. They got a lot of guys like you who are well-meaning and plus their butts, trying to protect people, and a lot of good's done. But overall, the federal state's growing, the control's growing. So I'd like you to speak to that, Chief. And again, we appreciate you graciously coming in and being interrogated about, your allegiance stands with the state and the city, doesn't it? I mean, your allegiance stands with the Bill of Rights, Constitution?
Absolutely. I mean, when we take our oath of office, we take an oath to the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of Texas, and my job is really. My number one concern is the welfare and the safety of the people that live, visit, and work in Austin. That's the bottom line. Absolutely.
Expanding on that, though, we were privately talking about, you're saying you don't want America to be a police state. You're saying you don't want it to be like Cuba. I want to paraphrase what you were saying. Do you want to elaborate?
Well, I think that you have to, you don't ever want to be in a situation where in Cuba, they want to know what your parents are thinking. What is their train of thought? Do they speak out against the government? We never want to be in that kind of place, because my father used to tell us when we got to this country, from here to the moon, there's no better place on earth, and I would hope.
And look at you now.
Well, and that's why I love this country. I mean, it's the best country. With all of our warts and everything, there's no other place I'd rather live than the United States of America. It's the greatest place on earth, and I'm hoping to.
I agree, but I want to defend what it is. I mean, America is the Bill of Rights, Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and we're having our liberties taken, and there's always these good reasons. There's always these excuses. There's always. I was talking to you during the break about the 10th Amendment, and you were saying, well, the Civil War decided that. Well, yeah, and then Reconstruction decided that. But, I mean, is there no end to the federal power?
Well, again, you're talking to the police chief here in Austin, Texas. I try to keep my focus on my local issues. I don't have anybody in the federal government dictating to me how to police this city. And the bottom line is that I work for the city leaders and for the people of the city of Austin. And my allegiance is obviously to my city and my country.
What if there was a huge terror attack somewhere in the United States and they said that we have to implement PDD 51, basically making the president a dictator? What would you do then if they told you, gave you a list, and they have these, it's been in the Houston Chronicle now, of 3,000 Austinites to be picked up, and Alex Jones is on there. And there's no judge, no jury, no indictment, no grand jury. It's just go pick up Alex Jones.
Well, we'd say, Alex Jones, we know him. We're going to vouch for him. But the reality is we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
You'll cross the bridge to follow
No, to figure out what if it's a lawful order. And we'll make that decision based on what we know to be right.
I mean, we got the city to throw out the Patriot Act here locally, to say that we oppose it. Remember
so the bottom line is just remember, we are a local police department. We are a separate entity.